Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. We're going to do another in my installment of line of videos called re-reviews or revisits. This is a revisiting of Tank Duel: Enemy in the Crosshairs, a game that arrived about the same time as Nevsky, which I did a review on for the first time recently. But I had done a review of Tank Duel before, way back when it first came out. I was enthused about it. I'd given it a final score of like 8 out of 10. Found a lot to like here. Found a lot of just kind of. I enjoyed it. It was sort of a big, knife fight with tanks kind of thing. And so a few years later, I recently kind of revisited it to play a few games of it to kind of give my thoughts. So let's just cut to the chase and get into what I like now or not about this revisiting of Tank Duel: Enemy in the Crosshairs. Okay, let's talk about what comes inside Tank Duel: Enemy in the Crosshairs. You get player boards. That's very important. Not only do you get a few player boards, you get a lot of player boards. And each of these player boards, if you'll notice, has all the information you need to represent a given tank that you will control one or more of in battle. They're double-sided, and so you will get twice the tanking pleasure, duly noted. And so each one of these, we'll go over all the iconography. Suffice to say, each player gets one of these. You also have a variety of different specific cards. This is terrain. This is going to comprise a single 100 card deck in the end, and that card deck is going to be a multi-purpose card used for a lot of stuff. And so we'll go into that later as well. You get special armor-piercing rounds here that you can use at your leisure, or not leisure. You get infantry rule set, anti-tank rule set, some special additional stuff. Once you get past the core simple version of the game, you get some robota. You got a fully functional AI that plays a part, a few other stuff. But the big thing is you get these tokens. The tokens have spotting markers, victory point markers, like the actual people inside your tank, victory medals for taking out an entire tank, etc., smoke, blah blah blah. You've got fire cards, broken cards, damage cards, which you will assess when damage is taken by a tank, and you get, again, this big stack of battle cards, 1 through 100, with a couple of trigger cards that you'll roll into the deck based on the criteria. You get the rules of play, which are really not that large. I've had this game for several years. It's got the coffee stains and I guess I was mowing the lawn that day to prove it. Goes over a lot of details. This is very well worn because I've done a lot of reading on it. You also get the standard playbook, which goes over a very full scenario showing you all the things you need, and then gives you some of the optional variants, and then gives you the actual scenarios that you can play. A very diverse set of stuff. And then the solitaire rules, solitaire example gameplay, great stuff. Ooh, that's my review already. And then we still have our player aids. Everybody gets one of these, thankfully. On the front page, you get all you need to know to follow through with the flow of the game. On the back, you'll get an example of all the actions you can take on your turn. And that's about it for what comes in the box. So with that, let's just get into an example of play. Okay, let's revisit how to play Tank Duel. Now notice I've made a couple changes. I tend to be someone who likes to bling up their stuff at times if I like a game enough. So I went ahead and did some things. There's one thing you're going to note when you play the game, because it's a tank duel. And by a duel, it doesn't mean like one-on-one. It means everyone's going at it. And so I've set up a very basic scenario. Loosely riffed on the first mission they have you in, which is basically 2 German tanks and then 2 Russian tanks. And yeah, they're going to go at it. Now, normally you would flip the tanks over so they're staring at each other and glaring and using their angry eyes. But in this case, for readability, we're not going to do that. So what is the purpose of Tank Duel? The purpose of Tank Duel is to win the most victory points. You're going to earn victory points for a variety of things, all destructive. When you take out a tank, you're going to earn victory points. When you kill a commander or a gunner or a loader or something else, you're going to earn, that's right, victory points. And at the end of the match, and the match occurs whenever this battle deck is exhausted, not once, not twice, but 3 times, or at least mostly exhausted, then you're going to count up score and see who won. This is the most basic of scenarios. There are plenty of other scenarios to play that actually add some of the customized cards into the fray, give you special rules. It really kind of expands out greatly. The one thing you'll notice is that your player board has everything you need to know, and on it you're going to be able to see your everything. How your move level is what kind of move cards you can play. Your fire level is what fire cards you can play, because they're all given a specific rating. For example, move 4. I could use this now because my move level is 6. It's high enough that this move card will work for me. If I had a move 8, I would not be able to use it, and that would be sad panda. Then we have, of course, VP chart. This is repurposed in several ways to show different pieces of information. Also, every tank has some certain information here that's going to be vital when you're handling damage resolution. And then you've got your range. Now, the game in Tank Duel, there's no map. That's one of the jarring first things you're going to realize. There is no map. And so you're basically dealing specifically with ranges, and anything that has to do with terrain features are going to be just part of this terrain cards that you play that kind of simulate the act of, moving 200 yards and finding a nice, natural spot where you can be hidden. Acquiring, damaging, getting stuck in a bog, or hull down, one of my favorites, is there. Now you'll notice that all of these stations are manned by a driver, assistant driver, etc. The Russians only have 4 in their allotment, but then again, but these are meant to be descriptive of the role that they play. And of course, if they're wounded or anything happens to them, it's going to impede the ability to be able to do anything much. Like, you lose your driver, you can't drive. You lose your gunner, well, you need to put that spot. You need to put at least someone in that spot, even if it degrades the ability to fire. And then that's about it. Now we also have these spotting counters. This is where you put things like spotted and acquired. When you in the game, when you are actually in vying back and forth, you're going to have situations where you're going to be able to spot other tanks. If you can't spot a tank, you can't fire at a tank. So spotting is sort of the fundamental underlying feature. So what you do is each of these tanks is marked with a custom numeric 1, 2, and there's the expansion actually has markers that let you use with more variety of being able to mix and match. But so this is tank 1 on the German side, tank 2 on the German side. Well, this is tank 1 on the Russian side, or tank 2 on the Russian side, and tank 1. That's how you figure out who you're spotting and who you're not, because you can spot multiple targets at any given time. So for example, if I'm here and I spot the Russian 1 tank, I would put my spot here, and that way I would always be able to go, okay, what have I spotted so far? Well, I know I've got tank 1 and tank 2 spotted, whatever. Now, one of the reasons I bling this up, because I'm just so weird, I had 2 things. One, I use these to kind of note when it's what range I'm at, because it just helps me remember the lookup. Nothing big. And I also added little people, because I want people in my tanks, and if they're wounded, they're there, and if they're gone, well, they're just gone. But that's me. I happen to be weird. The one valuable thing for me, particularly in low player counts like 2-on-2, is that sometimes it's hard for me to go, like when it's my turn and I'm trying to remember who I've spotted and who I haven't, because yes, I do have a small memory retention of a lot of rules in a lot of ways. Sometimes it's hard for me to go look across and go, okay, that's tank 1, tank 1. So what I do instead is whenever I'm spotted something, I just put a tank and point at it, and then there. Now I know that I've spotted both of those units. I can tell in like a quarter of a second instead of a second and a half, but no big deal. But I tend to like it, and I think it adds a nice touch for my gameplays. That said, I wouldn't recommend doing this for all the gaming groups. Some of my gaming groups find it just awesome, and they think it's delightful, and others are like, no, you must use only the components that came in the King James version of the box. They are the only ones ordained by God. And so I just go with the regular pieces for those folks. But hey, for this, let's have some fun. Now, how do you play? Let's get rolling. And gameplay is actually pretty easy. This sequence of play is demonstrably sufficient. Gives you everything you need to know, and what you're going to do is you're going to draw cards up to your hand size. Then you have an initiative phase, a tank phase, and a reinforcement phase. Let's go over those now. I've already predetermined this deck. Now when you have, I'm going to assume that we're playing 4 players. It is possible for a given side, for me for example, to take on multiple tanks. In that case, the hand size drawing is going to be somewhat different. And so what we're going to do is we're going to assume here. So you always get 4 cards as a baseline. Now it's going to be added and removed, but you get 4 cards as a baseline. Every tank that you personally possess, that you personally own and personally vouched for, and that has its pedigree and papers, you get an extra 2 cards. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you have an excellent, otherwise an elite commander, you get a 7th. You get a, yep, there you go. So that's the only time you get a 7th. Now you also can lose cards. If you're on fire or you are low on morale, you're going to lose a card. If your crew is green, you're going to lose a card. If your commander's dead, you're going to lose a card. So it's going to ebb and flow. And that's how everybody sets themselves up. And then comes the initiative phase. What are you doing on the initiative phase? You're going to see if you can actually go first, second, middle, whatever. And you don't always necessarily want to go first. What is the point here? Again, the point is just to basically score more victory points. And the only way to do that in this scenario is to just go out and go forth and conquer. That said, there are some scenarios where you're going to be a little bit more judicious about your placement. There's going to be like king of the hill scenarios or hilltop scenarios or etc., etc. So in this case, we're going to look and see what kind of cards. What kind of cards do we have? Well, there's move cards, and these are pretty simple. You can move and then attempt, to not be flanked. If you're flanked, flanked is kind of a nasty condition you don't want to find yourself into. Notice that you get cover. You get more cover, but you don't, and you get less options to be hit. But if you're in motion, your enemies can do bad things. So you generally don't want to be in motion, but everything's contextual. And anytime you move, you're spotted. This is terrain. If you settle yourself into terrain, well then look, you've got some natural cover. You've got possibilities to hold down. You can even try and conceal, which means all those spottings people have done are gone. Woods, another set of terrain. Fire is the actual fire action, and that's a whole sequence of itself. So if I choose firepower, then you're gonna basically fire at something that you've spotted. Hopefully you'll hit it. Move again. Flank is interesting. Flank is very abstract in this game. When you play a flank card, what you're literally doing is basically saying, I've flanked you. And yeah, I've flanked you. Yeah, I got those counters wrong, but suffice to say. And that means that whenever damage resolution is occurring, if you're firing at someone and you flank them, then it basically increases the odds of bad things. And then finally, mud. This is odd because this is cool because mud isn't something you're going to want to play on yourself. It's something that you can slap onto someone else that's actually in motion, and that's going to basically do some debuffing of their tank, so to speak. Do some bad things, make it easier for them to hit. Might even bog them down, which means they're going to have to move. They're going to have to do something to get out of the mud. So anyway, but that's great. And these all, notice these are on the side. There's a really nice touch where all of the actual really quick information you need, you can see without having to like fan the whole card play out. You see everything at a glance. And there's other multi-purpose pieces of information on here, and those are all contextual to a given situation. Order icons, penetration mods, all of these things just come into play at different aspects of the game at no cost to you, the owner. All right, so the first thing we do is decide, well, these numbers are important. The numbers we choose are the numbers that dictate the order of how the round's going to play out. Let's go ahead, and we're not going to flank anybody yet. We haven't spotted them. We don't care if we go first, so we're going to do that. And all these other guys are going to make really informed choices here about where they want to actually have their units. All right. So everyone does that, and that's the initiative phase, and then they reveal. Well, I got 81. Well, I got a rock. Ooh, 10. Yeah, that would be, if you really want to go first, 42, and finally 72. All right, so now we have the order of play. So our good friends here are going to go first, And their first action is to discard this card. Going to be a lot of discarding of cards. You're going to churn some serious cardness from that. So, and then you score any. You do an administrative phase, which we're not going to really cover right now because we're just starting out. But in the administration phase, there's a few things that you're going to check for. If you're dealing with smoke, or you're trying to obscure yourself with smoke, you're going to have a check there. If you're on fire, which is a bad thing, you can discard OIs. Some of the cards have OIs, and those are called order icons on the left. For example, there's 3. If you really need this tank to not be on fire, then you need to discard right now. During play, you can discard four cards with 4 icons, and then you're not on fire anymore. But that's not all. You also have to do a morale check, and so you check that. You can discard 4 OIs to boost your morale, etc. Why would you do this in the administration step? Well, it basically lets you keep rolling, and kind of get past that bad situation before you get rolling, and that lets you do your turn. Now, during your turn, you could also do something similar in getting rid of these as well. But it usually ends up, I believe, that takes your action, and so you don't get a you'd prefer to do it where you can still use your main action. It's basically the whole point of that. All right, so blah, 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 blah. And then we get to the fun part. This is where you get to choose an action. And this is where the handy-dandy, again, really nice sheets. Almost all the information is there for us. We get to choose one of these main actions. Now, they say you get 1 tank action and any number of field actions, which the nomenclature makes sense now that I understand it. But it's best to think, to me, it's best when I'm teaching it to go, tank action is your main action. You can do 1 main action a turn, and then you can do any number of free actions. And but basically that's what it is. And then like you can litter them however you want, but you can play command cards. These are special kind of cards that are kind of out of band. You can play terrain cards on the enemy. All of this can be done without having to worry about your main action. You can stop moving just by discarding a card. Blah, 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 blah. So those are the things you can just do. However, these are the main actions. In the tank actions, you can use up to 1 to 3 cards to do a tank action. And they vary as far as what they do. Leadership's not... It's used contextually, situationally, to do some things like if you really, really want to get out of harm's way, or you can do that, or you can even use it to try and beef up your odds of hitting someone. Fire, move, and flank. Fire, move, terrain, and flank are kind of the biggies. Those are the ones you're going to do. Like you move, and again, this handy chart tells you if you move, you can also you can use 2 move cards to move twice as far, or you can move and try and flank someone, or you can move, flank, and even try to get into terrain, sort of like make a mad dash to go 200 yards across the battlefield to go hide behind a building or under a hill or whatever. And then firing has its own phase, and that all works together. But everything works smoothly. The point is just to remember that you are. You get up to 1 to 3 cards. And we're going to do that now. Enough talking. So I'm going to do move, and I can't fire. The only thing I can fire is this. So we're going to do move into the woods. That's our plan. So what are we going to do? We used up our cards. We're not going to do any field actions right now. Move. Here we go. So I can move up to 200 meters. I'm now at 600. Why is that important? Because the range is basically how far your opponent is and how far you are in the range. Everyone starts at 800 in this scenario, so 8 plus 6 is 1400. You'll notice here that by moving in closer, I've increased my odds of hitting and penetrating. So that's good. So now we're good. That's great, except it seems good. We've got a chance if we were flanked, we'd get to pull a card. Pulling a card is something you're going to see a lot of. You pull a card and check the icons on it and discard it. Lots and lots of churn. And then you minus 40 to hit, cover 30. Well, that sounds really good, except someone can throw a mud on you and then fire at you, and that's not good. So we're going to go ahead and ditch that because we're going to put down our woods card. And what does that do? If in motion, place this card in a holding box. So cover 10, and then hold down 10. So what does that mean is that the cover right now, if I was to have combat right now, or get fired on, that would be my cover rating to help reduce the odds of being hit. Hold down is another opportunity where if I try and do a hold down, this is going to be the number I'm looking for to do hold down, which is great because then it means all I can hit is the turret. So, however, I have this trigger here and says conceal, so I'm going to pull a battle card. If it is 30 or less, and it is not, which is honestly okay, I would then be concealed and people would not be able to spot me anymore. Again, being the first turn of the game, not a big deal. No one's spotted me yet. Or have they? Let's find out. Because when you moved, you caught yourself in a trap. When you move, notice this trigger, which is spotted. That means that every one of the enemies can now spot you. So now they're all looking at you, kid. Alright, so now they're looking at me, and then of course I gotta, and then the conceal. So that would have been nice if I would have been able to conceal, but I couldn't. So there you go. And that's it. That's the end of the turn. I've discarded my cards, and we're good to go. Who's next? Well, what's the next number? Is 42. Now 42 is interesting because, because it's right here. So we're gonna look at the cards that can be done here, and naturally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this is our options, and notice, well, we really run the market on moving, and we can move all of these. We can do a double move, but we have no option to fire, which is kind of sad, because it would have been nice to have been, still. So we're going to do a double move. A double move, if we were flanked, we would instantly not be flanked anywhere. We wouldn't even have to pull a card and check to see if we weren't flanked. We would just not be flanked. We're going to keep this. Unless we really want to do that. Yeah, we don't have any options, so we're going to go ahead and keep this. We're going to take the 2 biggest moves here, and we're going to go ahead and, unfortunately, it's going to leave us in a, yeah, this is not a good move. This is not a smart move, it's just a representational move. Now notice we're in 400 range. That's cool. Why? Because we get an extra card next turn if we're closer to the battlefield. Our senses are enlightened, and we are much better about something. So anyway, so there's that, and yeah, I personally would never get rid of a tactics card on the initiative, but anyway, but yeah, so there we go. So that's all we did. We just did a double move, and now we're like sitting ducks, spotted. So look at that. Now, all right, look at that. It's like that Spider-Man meme. Alright, so now we've got these 2 tanks able to see me, and these 2 tanks able to see him, and that's where we are. So we've got ourselves a tournament. Alright, so now we go to the next card, and that is 72. We're going to go ahead and remember to pull this off right away this time, and we're going to look and see what we can do here. So, let's see, move, leadership, tactics, fire. We could theoretically fire right now. We could do a fire action. We've got leadership, we've got tactics. But notice that right now we're at 800 and 600, 1400. It's still not, our tank here doesn't have a great to hit percentage. Notice that it's at 37. At the same range, our tank here is 51. So the Germans definitely have an advantage here. I wouldn't feel personally good about it, but we're going to do it anyway. Now let's do it. Let's do it. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a double move and be a sitting duck. Yeah, I mean, we could use leadership. Leadership, again, gives us lots of different options to do some cool stuff. Spot, hold down, but we don't have any, you know what? We are going to do it. We are going to fire. We're just going to fire right now. Forget the moving. Forget the moving and shifting. We're going to go ahead and we're going to fire. We're going to initiate a fire sequence. So, how does that work? Well, we'll just leave these here now. So, whenever you're firing, of course, you're spotted, which means that now, we'll set these over here. So now I can see both tanks, and so basically I can see both on both sides. So we've played our hand literally, and we've said, okay, we've we're gonna hit. We're gonna do this. Now, this is where combat gets fun, and that's, I'm gonna play a leadership with it. So, fire, leadership, possible tactics. So now we're gonna get into how it plays when you fire at an enemy. Okay, we're gonna do some firing here. T-34 is going to fire on his German nemesis right here that he has both spotted and targeted. So combat is, or firing sequence is basically a 3-part mini-series, and you're going to go through all the steps. Memorizing these steps is going to greatly aid you in speeding up the game. So let's go over all the things that go into the very first part, which is actually determining whether you hit the target or not when you fire. We start off with the base value. We know that the distance is 1400 because 600 plus 800 is 1400. So we're going to set this here for now, just to kind of note that this is our base value is 37. Okay. Then we're going to look at one of the cards where we're going to pick the card. Sometimes you can use multiple. If you use multiple fire cards, you get to pick what actually hits, what actually location. If not, then you just have to pull a card and wonder. This is +5 to hit, so look at that. So we're already at 37 plus 5 is 42. So we're at 42. Then have we acquired the target? No. If you fire at it the first time and you want to keep firing at it, you can do what's called acquiring a target. If you acquire, you add a bonus, but that means you can't spot anything else. Your target, you're locked in on that target, and so you have choices to make that kind of. If you ever need to steer at another target, obviously you've lost the acquisition. So we don't have that going on. So we're still at 42, and then flanked. Or have I flanked him? No. Well, that's a bummer. No extra. Otherwise, I'd get an extra 10 to hit. So we're still at 42. Then we use the attacking cards here. We're going to use leadership here to add 20. So 42, 52, 62. Then we look and see if there's any detriment here. And then here, and we go 62. Cover there is 52. So we're back down to 52. And then we look at the tank size, 52 minus 5. For being smaller silhouette, I guess. 52 minus 5 is 47. We're back to 47. And finally, is there a tactics card that can be played? There is not. So 47. So what needs to happen is I need to pull a card, and that number needs to be 47 or less. It is not. So I have missed, and that's it. That's literally it. So at any point in these large mini-series things, if anything doesn't go, if you don't hit, then that's it. That's all done. If you do hit, then you go on to the next phase. And you know what? We're gonna simulate that. We're gonna simulate that right. Darn it. You know what? I'm just gonna. Oh yeah, there we go. Fire 2. Oh really? It's not going to be useful. All right, so we missed. We totally biffed. We've exposed our position, and we didn't even hit the target. So that's not good. So let's assume, though, that we did pull a card, and that card was... Let's just assume it was a hit. Let's assume that we pulled it and got just lucky strike. So let's say we hit it. So we did all that calculation and we hit. Then we go into what's called the determining where the hit location occurred, and did we penetrate the tank in order to do that. So how do we do that? So we assume that we pulled a card. We hit this tank somewhere. We don't know. We pull a card and we look and go, what is it, 9? So this number here is called a target number. And so we hit it in the turret. So the grand turret, so that's where we're at, and we're going to mark that here. Now that means that its armor, we hit, what are we doing? That's not it, it's down here. Turret, there we go, okay. That means that its armor is 6, unless we flanked it, in which case we'd have a better odds of penetration. So we look up here and we go, okay, my penetration is 5. I didn't load special ammo. You can load special ammo here, and if you did and you used it, then you would get an extra bonus. Again, at long range, it's almost not a great idea with this tank, but work with me here. So we have 5 against 6. So that looks bad. That looks like we're not going to penetrate, but we always pull a battle card because we never know. Whoosh. And we have -2. Okay. So not only is our 5 gone down to 3, it's also, yeah, so there's no way that it penetrated. The only way it would have penetrated is if we've been able to get a card that actually allotted us positive points, of which there are cards there that do that. And we're going to see if we can find one here. Yeah, most of the time, you never know. You never know if this, oh man. Yeah, so this is silly. Okay. Yeah, so you can see there's a ton. There we go. Let's 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Let's assume that we pulled this just so we can keep going. But in generally speaking, you can see that just because you hit something doesn't mean you penetrate it, and only if you penetrate it does something happen. So right now we were at 5 and 6, and then we do this. So we look and go, okay, 6 to 5. Aha, I win. But no, I've got +3, so now it's 8. This is the chaos of the battlefield. So 5 + 3 is 8. And we're going to keep this card. This is the one card we keep around because we have other stuff that this information here that's going to be useful in the next phase, assuming we actually penetrate. In this case, 6 against 8, well, now we have achieved a very rare ability from long range to hit this tank. So let's just say everything worked well and we did this. We set this here. We're done here now. We don't need to worry about that. And that's it. We've actually not only hit the tank, we've penetrated its armor, and now we're going to get even more chaotic because we're going to assess damage. How does that work? Well, one of these random cards, we look here. Now here's the first thing we do. Is we look and go, does this target number match this critical hit number? Because if it does, then forget it. We're in critical hit mode. That's usually worse than if you're not critical hit. Get it? Yeah, see? This is not a critical hit, so we hit the turret. So we go down to where the turret is and we decide, did we take light damage or heavy damage? Again, this is where the damage is, all these card plays and these interactions just blossom into this whole, this general whole of just chaos in the battlefield. So we did hit the turret. We did heavy damage because this card says heavy damage, which means there's our line. This is what we're going to do. Now we can ditch this card for now. So we did heavy damage. What does that mean? In the turret, well, the loader's dead. So the loader is just flat out gone. Goodbye, loader. Goodbye, loader. Loader of mercy. The gunner is injured. He's wounded, but he's not dead. And again, so the victory points, 2 victory points are assessed because we killed that crew member. Sweet. Not. And then explosion. Explosion means we pull a card, and is there an explosion icon? There is not. If there was an explosion icon, the tank would be destroyed and everyone would have to try and escape. And that some of them would, some of them would not. It all depends on the battle card. And then fire. Again, if it's in all caps, it happens. You don't need to pull a battle card. It just happens. If you don't, if it's lowercase or just, then you do have to, it's either a wounded condition or you have to pull a battle card to confirm that this happens. So if there's fire on this, and there is, look at that, explosion, fire, and spotted. Dang. All right, so there's fire. So now we do this, and now the tank is on fire. All right. That means that it's on fire. That fire is going to have to be put out. Reduce a hand size by 1. Not good. And so we've followed through that. Now that's almost done. Now we have one more thing, and that's the morale check. That's part of the damage. You're going to look and is anything ring true here? Do we have a green crew? No. Do we have a seasoned, not a veteran? See, with a seasoned crew, if there's any X that matches, the crew is broken, and then it's going to have to try and rally in the next step. So because we don't have a seasoned group, and or the tank exploded, if any of these ring true, and in this case it does, then we have a broken condition, and we're going to have to put that here. And that is what happens. And that's the end of that. And so this tank, he's already done his turn, at least this round, but he's, without a loader, I think we're okay. The gunner's wounded, but doing okay, holding on, etc. But at this point, it's not looking good. At the start of the admin turn, they're going to have to make some choices about whether they want to bail out and just give this up and start up, because you tanks never die. They just, reincarnate as other tanks in this game. And so that's where we go. So that's it. That's a basic idea of how it goes. Once again, if you get all the steps down of firing, you can probably run an entire simulation of it in about a minute just by quickly adding up all of the things that need to happen, all of the ranges, etc., and keeping track of it that way. And that's almost a full round of it. Generally speaking, the closer you get, the better your odds of hitting, but you also want to be getting into terrain. You want to be continuing to try and just migrate. You have to make some critical points. There's a point when you're just like, okay, we've lost this tank, but you don't really want to lose it if you don't, because that's a lot of victory points you're giving. If the tank blows up, it's 4 points, but if everyone in the crew dies, like, you've just given a whole passel of points, victory points, to your enemies. And that's the way it goes until you get to a certain card that's shuffled into the bottom half of the deck, and then you shuffle it once, shuffle it twice, and then there's the game end, and the game ends relatively immediately. So there's a lot of, this really captures the insane temperamental chaos of the battlefield, no matter what your skills of your tank are. So that's it. That's a quick revisit of Tank Duel. And also, for those of you who have it available, there's an additional Tank Duel expansion, which is honestly as meaty and mighty as the original box when it comes to content. That's definitely adds a few more things, a lot more, adds elevation situations and nighttime and just a whole other stuff. If you get into Tank Duel at all, you're definitely not going to want to be bereft of this in your collection. But I'm already getting into my review, so let's get into my final thoughts on how Tank Duel has held up over the years. Okay, final thoughts on Tank Duel, Enemy in the Crosshairs, as we revisit it several years later. So one of the things I found out was that there wasn't a whole lot I had against it originally. I thought that there were a couple things that could have been explained a little better, although the rulebook was, sensational, really. A couple things, and those stayed true. The one thing I would say is different is that back then I had some concerns because the awesome big tank boards were bowing a little bit, and I was worried about that over time. The reality is, since then, all of the boards have either been no different or better. So, God bless humidity or whatever, but whatever got them working, it's no problems there. So my 3-year-old comments, myself from 3 years ago, no issues on that. There were a couple things. It was interesting. Some of the things that didn't bother me then just started to kind of go, They started to just tweak me a little bit. But before that, the big thing was there were certain things to remember, lots of details to remember, despite the fact that this was not a full-on simulation. There were a lot of details to remember that I would say that the player aids and the player cards and everything on the boards and everything, I would say it's 90% really, really well done, which is high praise, because I've seen a lot of player aids lately that really just kind of regurgitate pieces of the rule book in ways that don't make them actually aid as much as just go, just don't make a mini rule book as your player aid. That said, you still got to get the right information on it. But there were a couple things that I thought could have been a little easier to figure out. I came back to, when you revisit it after a few years, the question is, do you remember enough about it based on your original understanding of the rulebook, or are you going to have to go back and relearn it? 2 points. One is there were a couple things, very little. Again, I had to reread the whole down to kind of remember kind of exactly what it was. The other thing is I didn't realize coming back to it that this particular, usually in all the GMT manuals, there's at least some, you have your introduction, your components, your how to set up, and then how to play, and then usually 1,000 pieces of awesome information. There isn't really a how to set up per se. I did have to, sometimes you kind of have to peek through to get information. Part of that's because this is so scenario based that a lot of the information is going to be on the scenario, not in this sort of rote setup. That said, it would have been nice to have had a kind of a, like certain things like, hey, where do these, everybody starts at 800 meters. Well, that's a scenario piece of information, but how do you, what do you do for recycling the battle tech? Well, that's in another place in the manual. And so that was one thing. The other thing is, despite like so much great information is on those player aids, that we're going to get into that when we get into the pros. But one of the things that's odd is that you get the sort of the outlier versions of the damage on a card, like like the narrative parts, like explosion, just some of the narrative stuff. But the more core stuff, the meat and potatoes things that happen when a crew member is killed, you don't have that on any of the player aids, which actually happens quite a bit, and then you have to go refer back to the menu. What I did to fix that was, of course, the obvious. Just I photocopied that page and scissored out and made my own little player aid of like, if your commander dies, if your loader dies, if your gunner dies, if your driver dies, and stuff. Just so I didn't have to keep going back into that rule book. And the other thing is that flanking is the overloading of flanking. Like the flank action can be if you're on the offense, if you're on the defense. That there's the when you're moving, there's when you're taking it as an action. That part got a little bit circuitous, but that's just kind of coming back after 3 years and remembering. Otherwise, yeah, the only other thing, because we're going to get into the pros, and the rule book is going to be definitely part of that. The only other thing was that for some reason this time around, the fact that it had no spatial representation just was a little bit more of a, I really wish it did more than it did before. Back then, I'm like, okay, we've got Through the Ages, it has no map. We've got other games that they can recreate the sense of an activity or an engagement without actually needing a map. And back then, I just kind of went, it's fine. I can totally understand it. I can see it in my mind. I can build this sort of picture of what the tank battle's going on in my mind. Since then, though, I've gotten, I don't know, something's changed, and I've gotten like, what, I really need some sort of spatial visual, and that's why I resolved that with, adding, again, the silly little party favor tanks that were given, 2-star ratings on Amazon, because they really do suck as party favors, but they're awesome as useful gadgets for me. I just, that was enough for me to kind of go, yeah, I get it. So I've seen other people do some really elaborate terrain kind of things. I don't think it needs to get there. I just liked augmenting the experience, or at least some sort of spatial element. Again, not a big deal. That's it. Now let's get into the pros of what I remember and what I recall. This is still very much a knife fight with tanks feel. You still have a lot of the same leveraging of just simplicity, some simple constructs. This is one of the people that didn't like it said that my group was like, this is just a card game with a bunch of battle mats. And I suppose that's the purest sense if you consider Fields of Fire just another Sudoku but harder. We didn't see eye to eye on that logic, but I think that there's a simplicity here that still carries on with the game as you're playing it that makes it fun, which is the bottom line ultimate goal in this game. I will say that the rule book, I gave it a couple little dings, but in essence, it's fantastic. It's very well organized. It's very well detailed. All of the scenarios are very well described. Everything you need to know, fluidly explained to you, definitely stays top notch. And I love the rule book back then. I've seen a lot of crappy rule books in the last 3 years since this sucker's come out. 4 years. 1920 and this one still holds its own well. Particularly, again, the play guide, the scenario guide. I thought that there's a few little errata here, but minuscule, like just nothing compared to some other games. But in general, like the whole play, when I walked through the game the first time, I got it. It's great, yay! The scenarios are varied, and I like that. You can play the vanilla base bones, sort of like you saw here, and it works just fine. Once you start getting into the other more elaborate missions, you can kind of see them fleshing out a bit more of what you can do, some more interesting decisions you make, adding the terrain, adding, additional, ways to get points, ways to not. I mean, it's just, they took a solid foundation and they just added, layers and layers of fun on top of it. The one thing I would say is that this game, it really feels like Tank War. The tanks really do feel unique, and you'll know that in a lot of ways. The range, the armor penetration, those are the simple things. But just like you kind of develop your own sort of personality for these tanks as you're playing them. Particularly if you're playing in other groups with other people, and you're kind of working to work together. The working together aspect, I have really grown to love more as well as the solo aspect. I didn't do a whole lot with the robot originally. I've done it now, and it's fine. I still think that you could have just a ton of fun just playing 2-on-2 yourself, multi-handed, and I think you're going to be fine if you just kind of just choose to forget in between and kind of stuff. The one thing I'll say is that this game is really, it's kind of billed as sort of a really action-paced, I mean, it's Tank Duel, not Tank Simulator. And so it's billed as this action-paced stuff. There is a part, though, where it's almost like flip-flop submarine warfare, where you spend like 90% of the time. And then there's this big peak of action. Big peak of action. This game flips it on its head in that you've got action. You're playing 3 cards, 1 to 3 cards. You're doing some field actions. They generally make sense to do them when you want to do them, and you do all that, and you're going back and forth, and then you get to the firing phase, and you sort of drill down to to find oil, and that kind of takes you out of the cadence of the game a bit, particularly. And so one of the things that I've done to mitigate that is I just buckled down this time compared to 3 years ago and said, I'm just going to memorize the freaking column of things and just get to the point. And it turns out, there's three major phases of that. First, you're firing to see if you even hit. And that's easy. You take the base value, you add one of your card values. Did you acquire it or not? You get points for that. Did you flank it or not? You get points for that. Look on your board. Is there anything to help or hurt you? Look on their board. Is there anything to help or hurt them? Check the tank size. And then finally, do you want to use a tactics card while I shoot at you? That's basically, I've got that down to about 12 seconds to figure that all out, to help people out, and with extra people, because I bring a lot of people that aren't hardcore war gamers in to play this game for a reason. And then when you get to the, okay, I hit you, but did I actually make a dent? Did I do anything more? Did I hurt your feelings, or did I hurt your actual physical form? And so, that one's the same thing. It's just like, okay, flip to see where you hit or not. Figure out what the defense is, figure out the penetration value, grab that card, check and see, yes, I made it. Then it gets into a point where damage explodes, like it sort of blossoms out in so many different ways that you can't necessarily feel like you can just go like, and then this and this and this and this and this should take my damage, which I think is clever. I mean, if you think about it, the alternative is to have all these combat tables that you have to, like, roll dice and figure out or whatever. Instead, it repurposes the cards and just keeps you in the flow of the card play. And so, again, when it comes to damage, yes, there's a lot of things, that people go like, wait a minute, so I draw this card, I check these numbers, is it critical, is it not, is it this, or is it that, is it major, is it minor, are they in all caps, are they not in all caps? Again, when you think that might be a little bit overwhelming, just think of what it would be like with combat tables, where here you're just like this, the gunner's wounded, the commander's dead, check for explosion, check for fire, and the best way to do it is to do, 12 seconds to do the did I hit you, 12 seconds to do the armor penetration, then stop and make it cinematic has been like my best, like, I love doing the cinematics, like, okay, roll for a minute, and the explosion in the tank, and the commander is wounded, and this and that, and you just go, that's your cinema part. Again, in an 8-player game, that can be like, okay, but then you're back and having that cadence again, take your turn. Again, this is not a real-time action game, so don't expect it, but at the same time, it is a nice compromise between simulation and not. It's never, you don't have to memorize the tiny minutia of things that you would with, again, like Tank Simulator, Tank Commander, MBT, all of that stuff. This is much more frolicking, much more raucous of an adventure, and honestly, it holds up well. Yeah, very, very well. And again, there are people, naysayers, that say, like, look, all you're doing is just feeding the engine and then a result comes out. You really only have these card plays. Well, I think that card play has significance. I think that I think that makes it fun. The things that makes it fun, and it makes it approachable. You have this finite situation, you set yourself up for it, and then you see what happens. And one of the drawbacks, and I didn't mention this in the cons, is that there is chaos. And if you're not in tune with chaos, if you're trying to simulate tank warfare and you don't want to deal with the unknowns, this might not be the game that just brings you to Tankavana. But on the other hand, war is chaos, and you can line up your best opportunity and still just not have it work out, and some lucky son of a gun is going to come back at you. In general, though, it's going to flow and play out. And again, the feeling of going out there, of taking your shot, of leveraging yourself to get that shot, of dealing with the damage, of deciding, do I bail out, do I not? All of that cinematic experience is still in your mind. It's still playing out in your mind, and it's playing out with your friends. This is one of, if not, this is one of my favorite games to take to a convention. It's a fantastic convention game. You bring it and you set it up, and again, if you've got someone like me who's just like, screw it, I'm just going to memorize this so that we can all keep playing and keep on the fun, because it does bog down when you are like reading, okay, so you do this, and then you check here, and then you check here. If you got that you know, that guide that can help you through it, be thankful. And that's Tank Duel. I gave it an 8 back then out of enthusiasm and just loving the refreshing, different, just fun design. And then over time, I'm like, okay, I saw little things that are kind of like, okay. But now I'm giving it the same rating, because even after that newness and the newness of the design wears off, the actual, like, the meat of this game and the joy I get from it, playing with a solo, playing with, 2 to 4 players, 6, 8 is still, whew, 6 is kind of probably my favorite. But hey, you know what? Anybody can always play 2 tanks. It still holds its own, and it's really entertaining, even beyond just the newness wearing off. So I definitely liked this game. I recommend this game. Stays at an 8. It's fun. Don't think of it as a simulator, and you'll be just fine, and the treads won't come off your disdain, or your whatever. That made no sense. I'm moving on though. If you get a chance, so if you like this at all, grab the expansion pack. Grab the tank pack, because the expansion pack adds so many more things. And again, I love it almost at its most vanilla, and so I will never turn down playing this game vanilla. By vanilla, I mean just the most simple, not adding a bunch of rules, not adding the infantry, not adding any of that. Those are all great as you sort of get more and more into the, like, let's have a like a more meaty experience. Let's kind of bring everything in. But I still love the simple, fun, frolicking vanilla version of this. But yeah, bring the tank. Bring the AT guns, bring the infantry. You get into the expansion pack, and you're getting into night fighting and elevation, and you're going to be dealing with a lot more. It just adds to the fun. It takes away nothing. It adds, the expansion's like literally almost the amount of content of the base game, with all the scenarios included in the tank packs. It just adds. So 8 without the expansion, 8.5 with the expansion. Either way, fantastic game. I'm glad I revisited it. I'm actually excited to bring it to the next convention I go to yet again. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.